go then?
Please.
It's fabulous to have the Speaker of the House of Commons here in Fabian's constituency in Leeds to open this centre. And as Trudy was saying, it's taken quite a long time to get to this point. And there's been a huge amount of hard work by so many people here in Leeds and the NHS and Trudy's team, and also from the Michael Palin Centre and from the charity which supports the two centres, from the government departments which put the money in, and in particular from the Speaker, because before he was the Speaker, our backbench MP, we asked him to do for us what became a very important review of support for children who stammer and have wider speech and language difficulties. And the year of speech and language therapy was one thing which came out of that review. But another thing was, I think, an understanding that we needed a second centre for support for stammering children and stammering adults here in the north of England. So it's fabulous that we're finally here. I know the centre is already up and running, but it's going to be officially opened as well. Listening to Thomas, what a fabulous speech that was. And look, if you can do that when you are 5 or 6, how old are you?
7.5.
7. If you can do that when you're 7.5, and just think what you'd be able to do when you're the same age as Mr. Speaker. Winston Churchill, I would say. But that was a brilliant speech, and also to the 3 brilliant speeches. At the point when I first called the Speaker and asked him, as he was John Bercow MP at the time, to do our review, at that point I had actually gone through a rather similar experience to Thomas's dad, because I had done an interview on Any Questions, and it had gone okay. I'd been quite stammery halfway through it, and the next morning I rang my dad and he said to me, "You've got exactly the same thing as I've had all my life." And that was the first time that me and my dad had ever spoken about it at all. And he, by that point, was 60 and I was over 40. So if you've already got your dad on the straight and narrow much earlier, then that's a fabulous thing. And for me, and for many people who have stammers, being able to talk about it and be open about it is a very important thing, and that's what I've been able to do during the time in which Mr. Speaker's done his review. It's fabulous for us to know there's going to be so many children and adults here right across the north of England whose lives are going to be transformed, as Thomas's has been, by the expertise and the brilliance of the people here at this centre and all the people who are supporting it. So today is a great day of celebration, and what better than to have Mr. Speaker himself come here to Leeds and open our centre. So you are very, very welcome, and we thank you for all the campaigning you've done over years to make today possible.
Yeah.
Ed, thank you for your warmth and generosity. It's a delight to be in Fabian's constituency and to come to such a magnificent and precious facility, which undoubtedly, as we have witnessed, is already transforming lives. I meet today many people whom I've met before and others whom I've never met, but whom I know will regard this as the precious resource that I can see it is. I see Francis and Willie from the Michael Palin Centre in London. And the only person missing, I think, is Diana de Grunwald, who's a very key figure and quite an effective and passionate campaigner for visits and for funds and for profile. And the thought that we have now replicated that magnificent resource in Farringdon with a comparable facility here really does warm the cockles of the heart. Ed referred to the work that we did together when he was Children's Secretary. It was of a wholly non-partisan kind, and I was absolutely delighted to undertake that mission massively, and from my point of view, ladies and gentlemen, unforgettably supported by an advisory group which basically the specialist knowledge on which I depended. But as with so many things in life, the personal can become the political, and the individual can transmute, if you like, into a collective endeavour. And I say neither with pride nor with shame that in my own case, my intense interest was the result of personal experience. I'd always done my best, I hope, to try to assist constituents with special educational needs, including with speech and language difficulties, perhaps particularly with stammer in some instances, but I didn't do so with any close personal identification until my wife and I discovered that our own son, Oliver, who is now coming up to 8, but who was at the time 3, had a marked speech and language difficulty. Not a stammer, as it happens, but at the age of 3, ladies and gentlemen, this will, I hope, resonate with you. He couldn't lick, he couldn't suck, he couldn't blow, he couldn't babble. He was manifestly frustrated. But what really made the difference was when my wife, Sally, said to me, "I'm sorry to say that I think our little boy is fundamentally unhappy. And that is what is really ripping me apart." And I identified with that straight away, because whatever the difficulty you might be experiencing, the notion that any child of 3 in an otherwise contented and reasonably fortunate household in a modern, advanced, industrialized society should be unhappy is almost unthinkable. And so, of course, I clicked into action, and Sally did, and we got the support that Oliver needed, and he's greatly benefited from that. He happens to be on the autistic spectrum, so he'll have difficulties going forward, but his speech and language problems have been substantially addressed. But I'm sure there'll be parents in this room who will identify with the point that I'm about to make, that there is nothing more frustrating than the well-meaning observations of those who say that there is nothing about which you should worry. And even from within our own family, my mother and Sally's mother and godparents and the like say, "Oh, don't worry, there's nothing wrong, he'll be fine." Well, he was fine, but it wasn't just going to happen. It required identification and intervention. And in the absence of such, as you, the specialists amongst you and many others besides will know, emotional and psychological difficulties, behavioural problems, lower educational attainment, poorer employment prospects, persistent communication impairment, challenges to mental health, and even a descent into offending or re-offending can result. Of that, of course, the corollary is that with identification and intervention, and specialist, expert intervention of the kind which you specialise, Trudy and your team at that, the effect can be transformative. And Ed and I know that such is the pervasive cynicism about our profession, that whenever we use this sort of language of transformation and changing lives and making great breakthroughs, there can be a degree of cynicism. But there is absolutely no question whatsoever that the work that this centre does is transforming lives for what is, if I may politely say so, in the great scheme of things, probably a relatively modest cost. And what I said, I hope with some effect, to Ed, and what repeatedly members of Parliament now say to the present government as well, is recognising the real fiscal constraints that you face, please also recognise to the best of your ability and with the right mindset that to spend to save makes a great deal of sense. Ladies and gentlemen, it is genuinely my privilege to be here. I've said before, and I say it on a completely non-partisan basis, I'm very happy to work and communicate with Michael Gove and Andrew Lansdowne. I regularly do so. That working on the speech and language review in the last Parliament was the single most stimulating initiative in which I have ever been involved in my parliamentary life. I hugely enjoyed it. Ed and his government committed £52 million to bolstering speech, language and communication services. The challenge is to preserve the gains and to build on them. And if I may, without embarrassing them, say what 2 gains I've witnessed today that will remain with me forever, they are the effects of your magnificent service upon Michael and upon Tom. That will never go away from my mind. And if there were no other beneficiaries, and there are and will be, I think you would have scored a remarkable victory. Tom, it's been my pleasure to meet you today, a self-confident, capable, happy young man communicating well. The same goes for Michael. Isn't it all so obviously worthwhile? And perhaps, Ed, you and I together. Straight centre. It is now officially 8 months on. Until now, you understand, closed. Open.